The air in the lawyer's office felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath but pretending not to. I sat at the end of the long mahogany table, hands folded, saying nothing. Across from me were my in-laws, the same people who used to order me to mow their lawn and scrub their patio tiles. My father-in-law, Richard, leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. My mother-in-law, Elaine, was clutching her handbag as if she'd been dragged here against her will. Melissa sat beside them, pretending she wasn't nervous, tapping her nails on the table. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming, everyone. This will be brief." He opened a folder and pulled out a stack of papers, legal documents stamped and sealed. The sound of those papers sliding across the wood was louder than it should have been. "Mr. Carter," he said, turning to me, "as of last week, you are now the sole legal heir to the Henderson estate, including the property, assets, and all holdings associated with it." The room went silent. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't blink. I just looked straight ahead, while my father-in-law's smirk disappeared. What estate?" Elaine asked, her voice shaky. The lawyer smiled politely. "The late Mr. Harold Henderson's estate. His will was finalized after probate. Mr. Carter here has inherited a mansion, several acres of land, and all liquid assets tied to the estate." Melissa turned to me, eyes wide. "Wait, you inherited a mansion?" I nodded once. "You never told us," Richard snapped. I looked him dead in the eye. "You never asked." For a moment, no one spoke. The lawyer kept talking, something about transfer deeds and asset registration, but none of them heard a word. Elaine's hand slipped from her purse. Melissa just stared at the table, realizing everything she thought she knew about me was a lie, or maybe she just realized how badly she'd misjudged me. I looked at the lawyer. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I think that's all we need." He nodded, sliding me one last document to sign. When I picked up the pen, my hand was steady, not because I wasn't nervous, but because I'd already spent years shaking. The moment the pen left the paper, I looked at the three faces across from me, the same faces that once looked down on me, and for the first time, they couldn't look back. You might be wondering how I got there, how a man who used to clean gutters for his in-laws ended up sitting in a lawyer's office, signing papers for a mansion he didn't even know existed. Let me tell you how. A few months before that day, I was living in the small guest room of Richard and Elaine's house, my wife's parents. The wallpaper was peeling, the air smelled faintly of bleach, and every morning I woke up to the sound of Elaine banging dishes in the kitchen. I'd lost my job 2 months earlier. My company downsized, and I was one of the cost-saving adjustments. I told Melissa it was temporary, that I'd find something soon. She smiled at first, but that smile didn't last long. Her parents offered to help. They said I could stay at their house for a while. At first I was grateful. Then I realized what that offer really meant. "Since you're home all day," Elaine said one morning, "you can help out around the house." Help out meant mow the lawn, fix the sink, drive Richard to his golf club, pick up dry cleaning, wash the cars, and clean the grill after their weekend parties. It didn't matter that I was their son-in-law. In their eyes, I was just a man who didn't make enough money to matter. Melissa never said a word. She'd just sit beside her mother during dinner, scrolling her phone, pretending not to hear the comments. Sometimes, Richard would joke, "At least you're handy, son. If this engineering thing doesn't work out, maybe we'll get you a uniform." They'd all laugh. I'd laugh too, because that's what you do when you're desperate and outnumbered. But at night, when everyone was asleep, I'd sit on the porch steps, staring at the sky, wondering how the hell my life turned into servitude. I told myself it was temporary, that a man's value wasn't measured by his wallet, but every passing day, I started to believe maybe I was wrong. That was before everything changed, before the letter came, before I learned that sometimes the people who think they own you are just waiting for the day you stop asking for permission. Every morning started the same. Elaine's voice echoing from the kitchen, Richard shouting from the driveway, Melissa scrolling on her phone like she didn't even live in the same world as me. I'd wake up before everyone else, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want to hear them complain that the grass still looks uneven or the car windows aren't clean. I'd put on the same faded jeans, grab my coffee, and go outside before sunrise to start mowing, trimming, fixing, doing whatever they needed that day. The neighbors thought I was their hired help. One even asked once, "Does your boss treat you well?" I just smiled and said, "I manage." Inside it wasn't much different. Elaine would hand me lists of little chores that always turned into full days of labor: fixing the faucet, painting the porch, cleaning out the attic. She'd always add, "Since you're not working right now, you can make yourself useful." Every time she said that, it felt like a nail being driven deeper into my chest, and every time Melissa just sat there pretending not to hear. Richard was worse. He'd come home from golf, smell like whiskey, and slap my shoulder. "You know, son," he'd say, "some men just aren't built for success. Nothing wrong with that. Every family needs someone to keep things running." Then he'd hand me his keys like I was his valet. I didn't argue. I needed a roof. I needed time to get back on my feet. At least that's what I told myself. But the truth was, I was starting to lose more than my pride. I was losing myself. Melissa started going out more. Dinners, parties, catching up with friends. She'd get dressed like she was auditioning for a new life and say, "Don't wait up." I didn't ask questions. I just nodded. One night she came home late, makeup smudged, perfume that wasn't hers. I sat up on the couch and asked, "Where were you?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't start. You're acting jealous." "I just asked a question. You're not my father," she said coldly. I stared at her for a long moment. "No," I said. "I'm the guy fixing your father's gutters for free." She didn't reply. She just walked past me and shut the bedroom door. That was the first night I slept on the couch, and I never went back to that bed again. The next few weeks blurred together. I was applying to every job I could find: grocery stores, repair shops, online listings, but nothing stuck. My resume looked weak. My confidence looked worse. Elaine started leaving passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. "Please remember to take out the trash. Dishes aren't going to wash themselves. We're not running a charity." And every note ended with a smiley face. One morning, while I was cleaning the backyard, I overheard them talking inside. Elaine said, "I told you she should have married Derek. He has a house, a business, real potential." Richard laughed. "Well, at least this one cuts the grass for free." Melissa didn't say a word. I stood there gripping the rake until my hands hurt. That's when I realized they didn't just pity me. They enjoyed watching me struggle. Later that night, I packed a small bag and slept in my car. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't make a scene. I just needed to remember what peace felt like, even if it was inside a parked car in front of the same house that used to feel like mine. The next morning, I drove to a nearby construction site asking for work. They said no. I drove to another. Same answer. By noon, I was sitting at a gas station eating a cheap sandwich, trying to figure out what was left to lose. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Elaine. "When you're done resting, the fence needs painting." I laughed. Then I deleted it. That was rock bottom. Not the hunger, not the exhaustion, but the moment I realized I wasn't even human to them anymore, just labor. I stayed quiet for a few more weeks. Fixed the fence, painted the porch, cooked dinner when they had guests. Not because I wanted to, but because I was done fighting battles I couldn't win. But somewhere under that quiet, something was changing. I didn't know it yet, but life was about to flip the script in ways none of them saw coming. It's strange how normal things can look before they start falling apart. If you'd seen us back then, me and Melissa, you'd think we were solid. We had an apartment, steady jobs, Sunday brunches, and arguments small enough to forget by morning. From the outside, we looked like any young couple trying to build a life together. I met her at a company networking event. She worked in HR, confident and polished. I was a mid-level engineer, the quiet type who preferred fixing problems to talking about them. She was the kind of woman who filled a room. I remember spilling my drink when she asked me if I believed in luck. She laughed and said, "You look like the kind of guy who believes in hard work instead." She was right. We started dating a few weeks later. She liked that I was grounded. I liked that she wasn't. She made me feel like my ordinary life could be something bigger, and for a while, it was. Her parents weren't thrilled about me from the start. I could tell by the way Richard shook my hand, firm, polite, but condescending. Elaine didn't bother hiding it. The first time we had dinner at their house, she asked what my father did. "He passed away when I was 16, I said. She smiled that fake smile people use when they think they're being kind. "Oh, so you've had to work for everything yourself?" "Yes, ma'am." "How admirable," she said. But what she meant was, how unfortunate. After that dinner, I asked Melissa if her parents didn't like me. She said, "They're just protective. They'll come around." For a while, I believed her. I worked hard, got promoted, bought us a small condo. Her parents even started tolerating me. or at least pretending to. They'd invite us to their parties, introduce us as Melissa and her husband, the engineer. It sounded neutral, but there was always a tone, like they were waiting for me to fall short. Still, life was good. Melissa and I used to take weekend drives out to the lake, talk about future plans, kids, a bigger house, maybe starting a small business together. We weren't rich, but we were happy enough, or I thought we were. Things started changing after Melissa got promoted. She started dressing differently, talking differently, using words like status and connections. She'd scroll through real estate listings for houses we couldn't afford and say, "One day, right?" I'd smile and say, "Yeah, one day." Then the layoffs came at my company. One meeting, one email, and everything I'd built was gone. I remember standing in the parking lot with a cardboard box full of desk stuff, trying to call her. She didn't pick up. When I finally got home, she looked at me like I'd brought home bad news from a doctor. "How long will the severance last?" she asked. "Maybe 2 months," I said. She sighed. "We'll have to cut back then." I spent the next few weeks applying for jobs. Every day she'd ask, "Any luck?" And every time I said, "Not yet," she'd get quieter. When I finally told her we might need to move to a cheaper place, she lost it. "I'm not going backward," she said. "We worked too hard to end up like that." "We'll be fine," I told her. "It's temporary." She looked at me like I was speaking a different language. "You don't get it, do you?" she said. "I grew up comfortable. I can't live like this." That was the first time I realized we weren't partners anymore. We were two people standing on opposite sides of a wall made of money and pride. A week later, her parents offered help. They said we could move in until things stabilized. Melissa jumped at the idea before I could even think about it. "They're just trying to support us," she said. I didn't argue. I just packed our things and told myself it was temporary. I had no idea I was walking into a trap disguised as generosity. When we first moved into Melissa's parents' house, I told myself it was temporary, just a few weeks, maybe a month, until I got back on my feet. That's what I believed. That's what I needed to believe. Elaine greeted us like she was doing charity work. She hugged Melissa tight, then turned to me and said, "Don't worry, Daniel, you'll get back on track soon." The way she said it, I already felt like I'd failed. The guest room smelled like dust and lavender. The bed creaked every time I turned over. I tried to see it as a restart, a place to recover, not to retreat. But the next morning proved me wrong. "Since you're around," Elaine said over breakfast, "you could help Richard fix the shed today. It's been falling apart for months." Richard nodded. "And after that, maybe clean the gutters. The landscaper's been overcharging." I hesitated. Then Melissa smiled and said, "It's just for now, babe. They're letting us stay for free." So I said, "Sure, I'll take care of it." And I did. That day turned into a week. A week turned into a month. Every time I thought I'd earned a break, they found something new for me to do. Paint the porch, trim the hedges, fix the leaky faucet, drive Richard to his golf club. Each time, Elaine would say something like, "You're such a big help around here." And I'd nod, like those words meant more than they did. Melissa started spending more time with her mom. They'd go shopping together, talk about networking and social circles. Sometimes I'd overhear her saying things like, "Daniel's just figuring things out right now," like I was some charity project instead of her husband. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how long a man could survive on pride alone. I told myself I was doing it for us, that any day now a job would come through, but the only calls I got were from recruiters saying, "We've gone with another candidate." So I worked harder, not at my career, but at being useful. I fixed everything in that house until there was nothing left to fix. Richard would joke, "You should start charging us, son." I'd smile and say, "Maybe one day," but inside, it burned. One evening they had guests over, Richard's business friends, the type who wore watches that cost more than my car. Elaine called out from the kitchen, "Daniel, could you help serve the drinks?" I froze. I wasn't staff. I wasn't hired help. I was family, or at least I was supposed to be. But I said nothing. I just nodded and carried the tray into the living room. As I handed Richard his glass, one of his friends laughed. "Didn't know you had a butler now." Richard chuckled. "Oh, that's my son-in-law. He's between jobs." The whole room laughed. Melissa didn't, but she didn't say anything either. After they left, I asked her, "You couldn't defend me? Not even once?" She sighed. "Daniel, it's just a joke." "No," I said. "It's not. It's what they think of me." She rolled her eyes. "You're too sensitive." That night, I went outside, sat on the porch, and stared at the lights in the distance. For the first time, I realized I wasn't living with family. I was working for them, and the worst part, I was doing it willingly. A few weeks later, Melissa's birthday came up. I used the last of my savings to buy her a small necklace. Simple, nothing fancy. When I gave it to her, she smiled politely and said, "Thanks," before opening another gift from her parents. A designer bag that cost more than 3 months of my old salary. She showed it off all night. Mine stayed in the box. That was the night I stopped believing effort could fix everything. Because sometimes love doesn't fade. It just gets buried under disappointment. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. It started small. Little comments that sounded harmless if you didn't listen too closely. Elaine would say, "You're still looking for work? Such a competitive market these days." Richard would add, "Yeah, if only hard work guaranteed success." Melissa would just sip her coffee and pretend she didn't hear. But I heard every word. The truth is, you can survive poverty if you have dignity. But when people strip that away piece by piece, it changes you. One afternoon, I was in the garage fixing their water heater. I heard voices from the kitchen. Elaine said, "I don't know why he's still here. He's turning into a permanent fixture." Richard laughed. "At least he's handy. Maybe we can get a tax break for employing him." Melissa said quietly, "Just stop. He's trying." But Elaine cut her off. "Trying isn't good enough for my daughter." That was the first time I realized Melissa didn't actually defend me. She just avoided the conversation. That night, when she came to bed, I asked her, "Do you really think I'm not good enough for you?" She turned away. "I'm just tired, Daniel. I'm serious." She sighed. "I didn't marry a handyman." I didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. The next few weeks were worse. Elaine started treating me like staff, barking orders, leaving lists on the counter. Richard snapped at me for small things. The car not washed, the lawn uneven, the mail late. I took it all quietly, not because I was weak, but because I still believed I could fix things if I just endured it long enough. Then came the dinner. Richard invited some business partners over. He wanted to impress them, the kind of men who judge success by the size of your watch. Elaine spent the whole day barking orders while I helped set the table, grill the steaks, and clean the patio. When the guests arrived, she called me from the kitchen. "Daniel, can you pour the wine?" I froze. Melissa was standing right there. Her eyes met mine for a split second. She could have said something. She didn't. She just turned away. So I did it. I carried the bottle out like a waiter and poured drinks for the same men who barely looked at me. One of them smirked and said, "That's a fine pour. Maybe you missed your calling." They laughed. Richard joined in. Melissa smiled awkwardly and looked down. I don't remember much after that, just the sound of laughter echoing in my head as I stood there holding the bottle. Later that night, when everyone went to bed, I cleaned up the glasses. Elaine came into the kitchen and said, "You did good tonight. It's nice having someone useful around." Then she walked away. I went outside, sat on the back steps, and stared at the empty yard. The house lights glowed behind me like a stage I didn't belong on. I whispered to myself, "This isn't a family. It's a job I never applied for." A few days later, I came home early from running errands. Melissa wasn't supposed to be back yet, but her car was in the driveway. I walked inside quietly. I don't even know why. Maybe something in me already knew. Voices came from the living room, hers, and another man's. He said, "You can't keep stringing him along." She said, "I know, but he has nowhere to go. My parents would lose it if this got out." I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. I walked out of that house and didn't stop until I reached my car. I sat there for an hour, staring at the steering wheel, feeling nothing. Not rage, not sadness, just a kind of numb clarity. That night, I packed my bag. No yelling, no confrontation. I left a note on the counter. "You win. I'm done trying." I slept in my car again, but this time it didn't feel like rock bottom. It felt like freedom. The next morning, I drove to a diner I used to go to when I needed quiet. The waitress, an older woman named Carol, noticed how tired I looked. She poured me a coffee and said, "You look like you're about to start over." I smiled weakly. Something like that. That's when I decided I wasn't going back. Not to that house. Not to that life. Not to anyone who saw me as less than human. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew it couldn't be worse than staying there. The first few nights after I left, I slept in the backseat of my car. I parked behind a grocery store near the edge of town, quiet enough that no one bothered me. The seatbelt buckle dug into my side, but at least it was mine. I'd wake up early, splash water on my face at a gas station sink, and tell myself it was temporary. I'd been saying that word so long it had lost all meaning. During the day, I picked up odd jobs, repair work, hauling trash, anything that paid cash. Sometimes I didn't eat until midnight. Sometimes I didn't eat at all. I called a few old friends, tried to explain things without sounding desperate. They were polite but distant. Everyone's busy when you're broke. At night, when the world got quiet, that's when the noise in my head started. The laughter from that dinner party. Melissa's voice saying, "I didn't marry a handyman." Elaine's lists taped to the fridge. I'd stare at the roof of the car, too tired to cry, too numb to sleep. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Melissa. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Mom and Dad think you overreacted. Maybe we can talk." I deleted it halfway through. 2 weeks later, I got served divorce papers. No explanation, no conversation, just a manila envelope left at a friend's doorstep. Apparently, I'd abandoned the marriage. I laughed when I read that. If only she knew what abandonment really felt like. The lawyer said I didn't need to fight it. We had no shared assets, no kids, no property. There was nothing to divide except years I wasn't getting back. After that, I stopped checking my phone. No one called anyway. I started working for a small home repair company, traveling from job to job. Some days I fixed pipes, other days I rewired old houses. I liked it because it kept my hands busy and my mind quiet. When you're rebuilding your life, silence is a gift. One morning, while cleaning out my car, I found something wedged under the seat, an old photo of me and Melissa from our first apartment. We were sitting on the floor eating Chinese takeout, laughing at something on TV. I stared at it for a minute, then folded it once and threw it away. Not out of anger, just to make room for air. Then one afternoon, while working on a job downtown, I stopped at the post office to pick up a paycheck. The clerk handed me a thick envelope I didn't recognize. No return address, just my name, Daniel Carter, typed neatly across the front. I almost tossed it, thinking it was junk mail, but something about it felt different. I opened it right there in the parking lot. Inside was a letter on heavy cream paper. It read, "Dear Mr. Carter, we regret to inform you of the passing of Mr. Harold Henderson. As the executor of his estate, I am writing to notify you that you are named as the primary beneficiary in his final will. Please contact Henderson and Miller law offices at your earliest convenience to schedule a reading." I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't know a Harold Henderson. At least I didn't think I did. There was a phone number at the bottom. I called it from a payphone outside. A woman answered, "Henderson and Miller, Estate Division." I said, "I got a letter saying I was listed in someone's will." She asked for my name, checked something on her computer, then said, "Yes, Mr. Carter, Mr. Henderson was your late uncle." "My what?" She repeated, "Your uncle. His will includes real estate and assets in your name. You'll need to come in for the official reading." I hung up slowly, staring at the receiver. For a long time I just stood there, listening to the sound of traffic. Then I sat in my car and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. After everything I'd lost, the universe had just handed me a mystery I couldn't begin to understand. That night, I didn't sleep in the car. I drove straight to the city listed on the letter. It was time to find out what the world had been keeping from me. The next morning, I drove 3 hours to the address printed at the bottom of that letter. The GPS led me into the nicer part of town, the kind of neighborhood where driveways curved like small roads, and every mailbox looked polished. The law firm's office was in a gray stone building with tall glass windows. Inside, everything smelled like coffee and paper. A receptionist looked up as I walked in. "Mr. Carter?" she asked. "Yes," I said, still not sure why I was there. "Right this way," she said, leading me into a conference room. A man in his 60s sat waiting. Gray suit, silver watch, calm voice. He stood when I entered and extended his hand. "I'm Robert Miller," he said, "executor of your uncle's estate." "My uncle?" I asked. "I didn't even know I had one." He smiled gently. "You did. Harold Henderson, your mother's older brother. You met him once as a child, I believe." I shook my head slowly. "I barely remember him." "That's understandable," he said. "Mr. Henderson was a private man. He had no children, no spouse. You were his only living relative." He slid a folder across the table. "Your uncle left behind a property, a financial account, and some instructions he wanted you to have." I opened the folder. The first page listed an address, a mansion on the outskirts of the city. The next page was a summary of assets. I stopped at the number, $1,984,000. I looked up. This isn't right. It is, he said calmly. Your uncle left everything to you. Why? He smiled faintly. Because you reminded him of himself. Stubborn, hard-working, and ignored by people who thought they were better than him. I sat back in the chair, trying to process what he'd said. I'd spent months being treated like I was worthless. Now I was sitting in an office being told I owned more than everyone who had laughed at me combined. The lawyer pushed another envelope across the table. He also wrote you a letter. I opened it carefully, It was short, written in shaky handwriting. Daniel, life has a way of testing men when they least expect it. You don't owe anyone your worth. You were born with it. Use what I've left you to live, not to prove anything. Uncle Harold. I must have read it 5 times before I finally folded it and put it in my pocket. The lawyer said, We'll handle all transfers within a few weeks. You'll receive the deed and account information once finalized. I nodded slowly. Do you have any questions? He asked. Just one, I said. Can I see the house? He smiled. Of course. The keys are yours. When I drove to the address, the road curved through thick trees until the mansion came into view. It wasn't flashy, more like something out of an old movie. Stone walls, iron gates, wide porch, big windows that caught the afternoon light. I parked and just sat there for a while, staring at it. It didn't feel real. After sleeping in my car for weeks, I was now sitting in front of a house I couldn't have imagined in my best dreams. I walked inside, dusty air, hardwood floors that creaked. It smelled like time, like old books and forgotten memories. There were boxes stacked in one corner with my name already written on them in faded ink. Inside were family photos, letters, and an old leather-bound journal. On the first page, my uncle had written, If you're reading this, it means life humbled you before it rewarded you. That's how it should be. I sat there for hours, reading his notes, learning about a man I barely knew but somehow understood. He'd built everything on his own, from the ground up, and never told anyone about it. He didn't believe in showing off wealth. He believed in earning peace. When I left the house that evening, the sky was turning gold. I stood at the gate, watching the sunset through the trees, and whispered, Thank you. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Melissa. Her message said, Heard from Mom that you got some kind of inheritance? Is that true? I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back one line. Meet me at the lawyer's office tomorrow morning. She replied within seconds. Okay, I'll bring my parents. Perfect. It was time to let them see what real tables turning looked like. When I walked into the conference room the next morning, it was déjà vu. Same table, same chairs, same smell of coffee. But everything else had changed. Richard, Elaine, and Melissa were already there. Elaine's jewelry clinked every time she moved. Richard's face was set in that fake, calm rich people use when they feel threatened. Melissa wouldn't meet my eyes. The lawyer came in right on time, briefcase in hand. He looked at me first. Good morning, Mr. Carter. Shall we begin? I nodded. He opened a folder and started reading. This meeting concerns the confirmation of ownership transfer for the Henderson estate, property, assets, and all legal holdings. Mr. Daniel Carter is the sole beneficiary. Elaine blinked. I'm sorry, what? He repeated it, slower. The estate and assets are Mr. Carter's alone. Richard's voice cracked. There must be some mistake. He doesn't have that kind of money. The lawyer smiled politely. It's not a matter of money, sir. It's inheritance. Mr. Carter owns the entire property outright. Melissa turned to me. You knew about this? I found out a week ago, I said. You'll remember I was busy painting your parents' fence when the letter arrived. Elaine looked like she'd swallowed a nail. Why didn't you tell us? I kept my voice even. Because I wasn't sure how to break it to my employers. The lawyer pretended not to smile and slid the final paper across the table. Mr. Carter, sign here to finalize ownership. I signed slowly, the pen gliding across the page like it had been waiting years for this. When I looked up, Richard's face was red. You think this makes you better than us? I set the pen down. No, I think it just makes you wrong about me. Elaine leaned forward. Daniel, surely you don't mean to cut family off like this. We can all benefit from... Stop, I said. Family doesn't treat someone like help. Family doesn't laugh while he serves drinks to strangers. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Melissa spoke finally, her voice small. So what happens now? Now, I said, you go home, and I do the same. The lawyer closed his folder. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. The estate is officially yours." I stood up and shook his hand. Then I looked at the three of them one last time. They couldn't meet my eyes. As I walked out into the sunlight, it hit me how different it felt to breathe without apology. For months, I'd been the one taking orders, waiting for approval. Now they were the ones watching me walk away. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The silence did the talking for me. That afternoon, I drove straight to the mansion. I stood in the driveway, looked at the iron gate, and laughed quietly. It wasn't revenge. It was balance. A week later, Melissa texted again. "Mom and Dad are sorry. They didn't mean to hurt you. Maybe we can start over." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "You already did, just not the way you meant." Then I put the phone down and went outside. The sun was setting behind the trees, turning the windows of my new home gold. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. After the paperwork was done, the house became mine officially. Not rented, not borrowed, not loaned, mine. For the first few days, it felt unreal. I'd walk through the halls in silence, touching the walls just to remind myself they were real. Every room had that echo that comes with big empty spaces, but I didn't mind. Silence felt better than disrespect. I didn't fill it with new furniture or expensive things. I just cleaned, fixed what needed fixing, and made a small corner into an office. For the first time in years, I worked for myself. I started taking repair jobs again, but this time on my own terms. No boss, no in-laws watching from behind curtains. Word spread fast. Clients liked that I was honest, that I didn't cut corners. Within months, I had more work than I could handle. I even hired 2 guys to help. They called me boss. The word felt strange, but good. Every night I'd drive through town and past the neighborhood where I used to live. Sometimes I'd see Richard mowing his lawn, or Elaine carrying groceries from the car. Once I saw Melissa leaving their driveway. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and just looked away. I didn't honk, I didn't wave, I just drove past, windows down, radio low. People think revenge is about proving someone wrong. It's not. It's about realizing you don't have to. A few months later, I started something new, a small scholarship fund in my uncle's name. It helped trade workers, plumbers, electricians, mechanics, pay for certifications or equipment. It wasn't charity. It was respect, because I knew what it felt like to be underestimated. One day, a young guy named Chris came to thank me in person. He said, "I was about to quit my program. Your scholarship paid my fees." I shook his hand and said, "Just promise me one thing. When you make it, help the next guy." He nodded. Driving home that night, I realized I wasn't rebuilding for me anymore. I was rebuilding for everyone who'd ever been made to feel small. The house didn't feel so empty anymore. I'd open the windows every morning, let the light in, make coffee, and sit by the big window that overlooked the garden. I wasn't waiting for anyone to walk in. I wasn't expecting a sorry that would never come. I'd already moved past it. Sometimes people ask if I ever forgave them. The truth is, yes. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. People ask me sometimes if I ever think about them, my in-laws, my ex-wife, all the people who looked down on me when I had nothing. I do, but not with anger, with clarity. If they hadn't broken me down, I might never have learned how to stand up on my own. If they hadn't laughed, I might not have worked so hard to find my voice. They built my motivation without realizing it. Looking back now, I don't hate them. I'm thankful. Because the truth is, you can't understand respect until you've lived without it. The mansion isn't what made me feel rich. Peace did. Being able to wake up every morning without fear of what someone will say or do, that's real wealth. Sometimes I drive by the old neighborhood, the same one where I used to mow lawns and scrub patios for people who thought I'd never be more than help. Now I pass those same streets quietly, window down, radio low. No revenge, no pride, just a small smile. Life has a way of coming full circle. I used to think success was something you earned to prove a point. Now I know it's something you build so you never have to. If I learned one thing from all of it, it's this. Never measure your worth by how someone treats you at your worst, because one day, the same people who laughed might have to watch you rise. And when that day comes, don't waste it proving them wrong. Just walk away. That's the loudest victory there is. If this story made you feel something, share it. Some lessons don't come with applause, just peace. And sometimes the best revenge is living like you never needed any. thanks for listening. For